AOC clearly thought this was going to be her big moment. Roll the clip.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana. Because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states.
During a House hearing, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez launched into one of her familiar arguments, attempting to justify stricter gun control measures. But Congressman Clay Higgins wasn't having any of it and shut her down with a single sharp line.
Clay Higgins wasn't having it and shut her down with just one line.
Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? A country where homes were built in cities with no locks.
That's exactly why today we're breaking everything down, because this isn't about picking sides. It's about good, old-fashioned common sense. So, if you like forming your own opinions, hit that subscribe button and let's get into it.
Let's talk facts here. There was a lot of discussion about New York City. There is no discussion about gun violence in New York City without discussing the iron pipeline that is Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and honorary mention to Ohio, where 70% of likely illegal trafficked guns found in New York City come from.
AOC's argument here is straightforward. The idea of the iron pipeline suggests that firearms legally purchased in WOB, states with looser regulations like Florida or Georgia, are then trafficked illegally into cities like New York. She's framing the issue as one of supply and interstate policy, placing most of the blame on red states. It's an argument centered on penalizing suppliers while largely overlooking the role of criminal intent. She tries to extend this same reasoning when discussing violence in Chicago and nearby Indiana, focusing again on how weapons move across state lines.
There's no discussion about gun violence in Chicago without talking about Indiana, because the violence and the mothers that we have to comfort are losing children due to the guns and the carnage and the lawlessness unleashed by those states. I move on. Every week in recent memory, we have had at least one mass shooting. This is not normal. Not only is it not normal, it is internationally embarrassing and delegitimizing to the United States.
So, yeah, it's a bit ironic coming from someone whose party helped put Biden in office and ran Kamala as vice president. Yet now she's concerned about how the U.S. is viewed globally. Not long ago, the former president appeared visibly confused at international events. And then there's Chicago, a city with some of the strictest gun laws in the country. It's true that nearly half the firearms used in crimes there come from out of state, but that actually undercuts AOC's point. It suggests that individuals determined to commit crimes will find ways around regulations regardless of how strict they are. Just look internationally. Canada and several European nations have tight gun laws, yet issues persist or criminals turn to alternative weapons. Still, AOC didn't stop there. She doubled down and tried to identify what she called the core issue, saying this.
Now let's talk about why. Let's talk about one thing more important to lobbyists and the gun industry than children, than houses of faith, than human beings. Let's talk about profit. In 2020, again, more than 45,000 Americans died by gunfire, reflecting an almost threefold increase from 2015. Are those statistics correct?
That's accurate.
So in your view, are you seeing a correlation between gun profits and gun deaths in the United States?
Yes.
AOC introduces a specific connection. She argues there's a direct relationship between the financial strength of the firearms industry and the number of deaths nationwide. At this point, her focus shifts from the weapons themselves to the money influencing the debate. She pivots quickly to highlight what she describes as massive lobbying efforts and political spending aimed at blocking safety measures. After making this broad financial argument, she attempts to steer the discussion toward what she calls the root causes, a move that shifts attention away from policy shortcomings tied to her own party.
For context, the NRA spent about $250 million in 2020 alone. That's more than twice the entire salary of Congress combined. In 1 year, lobbying against gun safety laws. There's also this discussion about anything but a gun, but that these are about violent people. But yet we aren't doing anything about addressing the actual root causes of misogyny, where 2/3 of mass shootings are connected to domestic violence, or the emergence of white supremacy radicalization, mass incarceration, and poverty, and the connections between that and mass shootings in our communities. I yield my time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
First of all, bringing identity politics into the gun debate is the last thing we need. It only clouds the issue. Second, someone should remind AOC that correlation doesn't equal causation. And third, throwing out statistics without proper context doesn't prove much. In 2023, nearly 47,000 deaths were linked to firearms. But that same year, motor vehicle accidents caused around 43,000 deaths, and even falls accounted for nearly 47,000. So, should we ban cars or stop people from using stairs? Of course not. The point is simple. Tossing numbers around without real discussion or practical thinking doesn't solve anything. Luckily, Clay Higgins stepped in to cut through the noise and bring some perspective. Let's take a look at what he said.
I'm going to bring us back in time to World War II. America's population, 140 million. 15 million American men came home from World War II. And there was weapons everywhere. We'll talk about mental challenge. My father was one of those men who was a Navy pilot in World War II. He came back from the war and built his family. I'm the seventh of his 8 children. We had guns everywhere. There was virtually no regulation. Any child in the 50s could buy a weapon from any seller if daddy sent them with the money. We didn't have mass shootings. It wasn't until 1968 in America that serial numbers were even required on weapons sold in this country. You order weapons through the Sears catalog by the mail.
Have been sold in this country for generations. People used to order firearms straight from the Sears catalog through the mail. That's the uncomfortable truth many avoid discussing, and for good reason. First, the breakdown of family structures plays a role. Decades ago, 2-parent households were far more common than they are today. Another factor is how these events are defined. Today, a mass shooting can refer to incidents where one or more individuals fire at victims, regardless of fatalities. In the past, the federal definition required at least 4 deaths. Media coverage has played a big role in that shift. Then there's the issue of notoriety. Sociologists have consistently found that the desire for attention drives many of these acts. It's a well-documented pattern. Clay Higgins highlighted this point by sharing a personal experience, offering some meaningful insights along the way.
You know what these houses did not have that were built 100 years ago in cities in America? You know what they did not have, Commissioner? Locks. Now I ask you all, what happened to that country, man? A country where homes were built in cities with no locks. A country where guns were everywhere and virtually not regulated at all. Where millions of Americans, 14 million Americans came back. It's 11% of the population at the time after World War II. And here we sit today where an entire once proud Democratic Party is presenting unbelievably unconstitutional laws to press upon our nation, and we have a police commissioner that says he would go home to home and confiscate legally owned weapons.
At the end of the day, it really comes down to this. Guns are inanimate objects. Without intent, they don't pose a threat. Smarter regulations could potentially reduce harm, and that's a discussion worth having, but it needs to stay within the limits of the Second Amendment. Go beyond those limits, and you're dealing with government overreach and a violation of constitutional rights. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and as always, keep thinking.